My name is Alina Morales. I was 36 years old the morning my mother-in-law stood beside my hospital bed and told my husband to leave me before I became a permanent burden. It was 7:15 a.m. The hallway smelled like bleach and burnt coffee. My incision still felt like fire every time I breathed. She thought I was asleep when she whispered it. "If you stay with her now, Daniel, you'll spend the rest of your life changing bed sheets." I remember the sound of her gold bracelet tapping the rail of my bed. Soft, steady, like she had rehearsed this speech. Daniel did not answer right away. That silence hurt worse than the stitches. What they did not know, what none of them knew, was that 2 days before my surgery, I had signed one document in the lawyer's office after finding something hidden in our insurance records. I smiled when she finally noticed I was awake. I even thanked her for bringing flowers. Then I asked the nurse for my phone and made one calm call from the bathroom they thought I could barely walk to. By the end of that week, my husband's entire family would be sitting in a doctor's office, hearing a truth none of them were prepared for. When I woke up after surgery, the first thing I heard was my mother-in-law's voice. Not Daniel. Not the nurse checking my monitors. "Sir, you still have time to think clearly," she whispered. The room was dim except for the blue light above the sink. My throat felt dry enough to crack. Somewhere down the hall, a cart squeaked across the tile floor. Slow, uneven. I kept my eyes closed because my body still felt too heavy to move. Then she said my name. Not kindly. "She's going to need help for months." Her bracelet tapped softly against the metal rail of my hospital bed. Gold links. Tiny diamonds around the clasp. She wore it every day, even at home, especially when she wanted people to notice her hands. Daniel spoke so quietly, I almost missed it. "Mom's not now." If not now, when? The heart monitor beside me kept beeping. Calm, steady, like it had no idea my marriage was being discussed 3 feet away. "She can't even sit up alone," Patricia said. "You heard the doctor." I felt heat crawl into my face. My stomach burned beneath the bandages. The surgery had taken 6 hours. Endometriosis, scar tissue, damage spreading farther than they expected. The surgeon warned me recovery could take 12 weeks, maybe longer. Patricia exhaled sharply through her nose. "You're 38 years old, Daniel. You want children. You want a real life." A long silence followed. That silence hurt more than the stitches. I opened my eyes slowly. Patricia stepped back so fast her purse slipped off her shoulder. "Oh," she said, "you're awake." The fluorescent light above me buzzed softly. Daniel stood near the window holding a paper coffee cup. His shirt looked wrinkled, like he had slept sitting upright. His eyes were red. Patricia recovered first. She always did. "I brought you lilies," she said, pointing toward the counter. The smell hit me immediately, sweet and thick, too strong. I hated lilies. She knew that. "Thank you," I whispered anyway. My voice sounded weak, small. Daniel walked closer to the bed. "How do you feel?" I almost laughed. How did I feel? My body had been cut open less than 12 hours ago. My husband stood there looking trapped between me and his mother. And the woman who once told me my wedding dress looked ambitious for my body type was now staring at me like an unpaid bill. "I'm okay," I lied. Patricia crossed her arms. "You gave us a scare." "Us. Not you." The nurse entered before I could answer. A young woman named Kiara, purple scrunchy, cherry lip balm. I remembered because I had noticed the smell before surgery while she adjusted my IV. "Good morning," she said gently. "Pain level." 6. That means it's probably an 8. I nodded once. Kiara checked my chart while Patricia kept talking. "The doctor said recovery depends on stress levels," she said. "Family support matters now more than ever." Something about the way she said family made my skin tighten. Kiara looked between us for half a second. Nurses notice everything, especially the things people try hardest to hide. "We'll help her walk later today," Kiara said. Patricia frowned immediately. She can barely move. She needs movement to heal. Daniel rubbed his forehead. Mom. No, I'm serious, Patricia snapped quietly. Look at her. Look at her. Not Alina. Not your wife. Her. Like I was already becoming an object. Kiara adjusted the blanket near my legs with careful hands. I've seen patients recover from worse, she said calmly. Patricia gave a thin smile that never reached her eyes. Well, let's hope she's one of them. The room went silent again. I watched Daniel instead. He would not look directly at me. That scared me more than his mother did. 3 days earlier, before surgery, he kissed my forehead in the parking garage and promised, when this is over, we get our life back. Now he looked exhausted, cornered, like someone carrying a secret too heavy to set down. Kiara helped me sit up an hour later. The movement tore a sound out of me before I could stop it. Pain shot across my stomach, so hard my vision blurred white at the edges. Sweat gathered behind my neck. I gripped the bedrill until my fingers cramped. Daniel stood immediately. You okay? I nodded too fast, then nearly vomited. Kiara handed me a basin, while Patricia turned away with visible discomfort. The faucet dripped softly near the sink. One drop, then another. I'll give you 2 a minute, Patricia said suddenly. But before leaving, she leaned close enough for me to smell her perfume. White roses, expensive, cold. You need to focus on getting stronger, she whispered. Daniel already has enough pressure on him. Then she walked out. The door clicked shut behind her. Daniel sat carefully beside the bed. For a second, neither of us spoke. I stared at the coffee stain near his thumb. Small detail, strange thing to remember, but pain makes your mind attach itself to tiny things. She means well, he said finally. There it was. Not an apology. An explanation. I looked toward the window. Rain streaked softly against the glass outside. Do you agree with her? I asked. Daniel froze. Only for a second. But I saw it. I think everyone's stressed. That wasn't my question. His jaw tightened. You just had surgery, Alina. Again. Not an answer. I turned my face away because suddenly I could feel tears coming, and I hated crying in front of Patricia more than pain itself. Daniel touched my shoulder lightly. His hand trembled. I noticed that immediately. I did not ask why, not then. By afternoon, they moved me to a recovery room on another floor. Daniel left briefly to get food. Patricia said she had calls to make. The room became quiet for the first time all day. Machines hummed softly around me. Outside the door, someone laughed at a joke I could not hear. I reached slowly for my phone on the tray table. My hands shook from medication. 3 missed calls from work. 1 message from my younger sister, Ava. How bad was it really? I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I opened the photo folder instead. Pictures from 2 days earlier. Insurance documents. Highlighted numbers. A beneficiary form. And 1 signature that did not belong there. My stomach tightened harder than the stitches. I pressed call on the number I saved under M11. The lawyer answered on the second ring. His voice stayed low. Mrs. Morales. I looked toward the closed hospital door before speaking. Yes, I whispered. I need to know what happens next. There was a pause on the line. Then he said something that made my entire body go cold. And at that exact moment, the hospital room door began to open. 6 months before my surgery, I dropped a glass bowl in the kitchen because the pain hit so suddenly I lost feeling in my hands. It shattered near the stove at 6:42 p.m. Daniel rushed in from the living room barefoot. Pasta sauce simmered on the burner behind me. The smell of garlic suddenly made me nauseous. Hey, he said softly, sit down. I remember feeling embarrassed more than scared. Like my body had interrupted dinner. I leaned against the counter while sharp cramps twisted through my stomach and lower back. My knees shook so badly, I could hear the tiny rattle of my bracelet against the marble counter. Not gold like Patricia's. Mine was cheap silver. Daniel bought it for me at a street market during our honeymoon in Santa Fe. One thin chain, tiny moon charm, $22. I wore it every day. Still a 6, he asked. Maybe 7. That's not normal, Elena. I laughed weakly. Apparently it is for me. But it wasn't normal, not really. For almost 2 years, doctors kept calling my pain stress-related or hormonal fluctuations. One prescribed yoga. Another told me to avoid dramatic language when describing symptoms. By then, I had already started missing work twice a month. Sometimes more. The worst pain arrived without warning. Grocery stores, traffic lights, work meetings. Once during a movie theater trailer so loud the bass vibrated through my stomach and I had to leave before the film even started. Daniel tried it first. Heating pads. Late-night pharmacy runs. Holding my hair back when pain medication made me sick. That part is important. Because people always think bad marriages start bad. Ours didn't. At least not visibly. Daniel used to leave notes in my lunch bag. Dumb little drawings. Smiley faces with terrible hair. Every Friday he brought home cannoli from the bakery near his office because I once mentioned liking them 3 years earlier. That's what made everything harder later. The good memories kept arguing with the bad ones. 3 days after the broken bowl incident, Patricia came over uninvited. I heard her heels before the doorbell. Sharp clicks across our front walkway. Daniel opened the door smiling too quickly. Mom. She walked inside carrying soup in a glass container. Chicken and rice. Too much celery. Patricia kissed my cheek while keeping her eyes on my face like she was checking for damage. You look pale. Nice to see you too. She ignored that. The apartment smelled like eucalyptus from the heating pad oil I had rubbed on my stomach earlier. Patricia hated strong scents. She opened a window almost immediately. You need fresh air in here. I stayed quiet. That was my strategy with her back then. Silence reduced damage. Patricia moved around our kitchen like she owned it, rearranging mail, wiping already clean counters, opening cabinets without asking. Daniel followed behind her nervously. You don't have to do all this, he said. Yes, I do, she replied, because someone has to keep things functioning. Her words landed lightly. That made them worse. At dinner, she kept watching me cut food slowly. You're still missing work, she asked. A little. How much is a little? Daniel jumped in quickly. She's handling it. Patricia folded her napkin with perfect movements. When I had migraines at your age, I still worked full-time. I stared at my soup. Steam rose slowly between us. My doctor thinks it may be endometriosis, I said carefully. Patricia nodded once, then smiled. That diagnosis is very fashionable lately. Daniel inhaled sharply beside me. Mom, I'm just saying women online convince each other they're dying every week now. I felt my face warm. Not rage exactly. Humiliation. There's a specific kind of humiliation that comes from being treated like your pain is trendy. I excused myself halfway through dinner and locked myself in the bathroom. The faucet dripped softly into the sink. One drop, then another. I pressed both hands against my stomach and breathed through the pain while Patricia's muffled voice continued outside. I could not hear every word. Only pieces. She's fragile. You're exhausted. This isn't sustainable. When I came back out, they stopped talking immediately. That was the first time I noticed it. The pauses. The unfinished conversations. The way Daniel started looking guilty before I even entered rooms. On the outside, nothing had changed. On the inside, I had already started counting silences. 2 weeks later, my doctor finally ordered more scans. The appointment lasted 43 minutes. I remember because I watched the clock the entire time. Dr. Keller had kind eyes and tired posture. He tapped gently against the scan images while explaining. "Your tissue growth is extensive," he said. "More extensive than we thought." The office smelled like printer ink and peppermint gum. Daniel squeezed my hand immediately. "We fix it," he said. Simple. Confident. I almost cried from relief, hearing someone say "we" instead of "you." Surgery got scheduled for March 18th at 8:30 a.m. Estimated recovery, 8 to 12 weeks. Estimated cost after insurance, $14,211. That number sat in my chest like a brick. We had savings. Not enough. Daniel insisted we'd manage. "We'll figure it out." But after that appointment, something changed in him. Subtle at first. He started checking our bank account every night. Stopped ordering takeout. Turned the thermostat lower. One evening, I found him sitting alone in the dark living room, staring at spreadsheets on his laptop. Only the screen lit his face blue. "You okay?" I asked. "Yeah." "Too fast." I sat beside him carefully because my cramps had returned. "What are you looking at?" "Bills." His tone closed the conversation immediately. That happened more often after surgery became real. Doors closing softly instead of slamming. Honestly, that's harder sometimes. A slammed door at least admits anger. Quietness makes you question yourself instead. A few days later, Patricia invited us to dinner at her house. Invite was the wrong word. She called Daniel directly and informed him. Her house always smelled like lemon polish and expensive candles. Every pillow stood perfectly upright. Nothing soft ever looked touched. She served salmon. I remember because the smell turned my stomach halfway through dinner. Patricia watched me push food around my plate. "You've lost weight." "Probably stress." "You should be careful. Recovery is harder on weak bodies." Daniel set his fork down harder than necessary. "She's not weak." Patricia lifted one eyebrow. "No, she can barely sit through dinner." The room went quiet. I focused on the grandfather clock ticking near the hallway. Tick, tick, tick. Then Patricia sighed heavily and looked at Daniel instead of me. "You need to think practically now." I felt it immediately. The shift. Not concern. Strategy. Daniel rubbed both hands together under the table. "We are thinking practically." "Are you?" she asked softly, "because surgery changes things." No one spoke for several seconds. Then Patricia said the sentence I kept replaying for months afterward. "You still have time to build a different life." Daniel stared at her. I stared at him. And neither of them looked at me. That was a Thursday. By Monday, I found the first insurance discrepancy. I was sitting at our kitchen table at 11:48 p.m. reviewing paperwork because pain medication kept me awake. Rain tapped lightly against the windows. Daniel had already gone to bed. At first, I thought it was a typo. One form listed Daniel as primary beneficiary on my supplemental recovery policy. Normal. Another listed Patricia Morales. Not normal. My fingers went cold holding the paper. I checked the signature line twice. My name was there, but the handwriting looked wrong. Slightly slanted. Too careful. I pulled older documents from the drawer beneath the coffee maker. More forms. Different signatures. One correction dated 3 weeks earlier. My stomach tightened. Then I heard footsteps behind me. Daniel stood near the hallway, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "What are you doing?" he asked quietly. I flipped the papers over too quickly. "Nothing." He stared at me for one extra second. Not angry. Nervous. Then he noticed the insurance forms anyway. And for the first time in our marriage, my husband looked genuinely afraid of a piece of paper. He opened his mouth to explain something. Then his phone buzzed. Patricia. 11:53 p.m. And the moment disappeared. Daniel declined the call. That mattered. Not because he usually answered Patricia immediately. Because of how fast he declined it. One glance. One stiff movement. Gone. The kitchen stayed quiet except for rain tapping against the windows. My tea had gone cold beside the insurance papers. I watched Daniel carefully while he rubbed the back of his neck. You should be sleeping, he said. Not, what did you find? Not, let me explain. Just sleep. I folded the document slowly. I think someone made changes to the policy. His face tightened for half a second. Then relaxed. Barely. That stuff is confusing, he said. Insurance companies mess up forms all the time. Maybe. But people don't usually react to paperwork like they've seen a ghost. I slid the papers into the folder again. You think I signed these? Daniel hesitated. That hesitation sat between us like another person. I don't know, he said quietly. You were on medication a lot last month. There are moments when betrayal does not arrive loudly. No shouting. No broken plates. Just one sentence, landing softly enough to almost sound reasonable. I stared at him. You think I forgot signing legal documents? I didn't say that. You implied it. Daniel looked exhausted suddenly. Older. I'm trying to help. The rain outside grew heavier. Water streaked down the glass in crooked lines. I wanted him to fight harder right there, to say Patricia had nothing to do with it, to sit beside me and laugh about some clerical mistake. Instead, he kept standing near the hallway, like he might leave at any second. That scared me more than the forms themselves. I went to bed without another word. But I did not sleep. At 2:13 a.m., I heard Daniel quietly walking into the living room. Then the balcony door opening. Then his voice. Low. Urgent. I slid carefully out of bed and moved down the hallway barefoot. The floor felt cold under my feet. The balcony curtain was cracked open slightly. Daniel stood outside in sweatpants, holding his phone tight against his ear. I know, he whispered harshly. Silence. No, she saw something. Another silence. Then, I said I'll handle it. My chest tightened. The city below looked blurred through rain and yellow streetlights. Cars hissed across wet pavement 6 floors beneath us. Daniel turned suddenly. I stepped back too late. For 1 second, we stared directly at each other through the glass. Then he ended the call immediately. What are you doing up? He asked. I crossed my arms against the cold. Who were you talking to? No one. A stupid answer. The kind people give when truth arrives too slowly. I almost pushed harder. Almost. But pain rolled through my stomach again, so sharply, I had to grip the kitchen counter. Daniel moved toward me immediately. Sit down. I hated that my body still trusted him enough to obey. The next morning he acted normal. Too normal. He made eggs. Packed my heating pad before work. Kissed my forehead twice before leaving. That performance frightened me more than the argument. Because now I could feel him trying to control the atmosphere itself. 3 days went by. I replayed that balcony conversation every night. On Saturday morning, Ava came over carrying grocery bags and iced coffee. My younger sister had the kind of energy that entered rooms before she did. Loud boots, fast talking, cinnamon gum always in her purse. You look terrible, she announced lovingly. Good morning to you too. She hugged me carefully around the shoulders. You smell like peppermint oil. That's because my organs are staging a protest. Ava snorted. For a few minutes things felt almost normal while she unpacked groceries. Bananas, soup cans, crackers I liked when nauseous. Then she noticed the paperwork on the counter. What's all this? Insurance stuff. Fun. I stayed quiet too long. Ava looked up immediately. What happened? I handed her the forms. She sat at the table reading silently while the refrigerator hummed softly behind us. Then her expression changed. Elena. What? This signature isn't yours. Hearing someone else say it made my throat tighten. You see it too. Obviously. She pointed near the bottom line. You loop your Y differently. I sat slowly across from her. The kitchen smelled like coffee and rain-damp coats. I think Patricia changed something. Ava blinked once, then laughed softly in disbelief. Your mother-in-law. She had access to our paperwork. That's insane. I know. No, Ava said carefully. I mean actually insane. I rubbed my palms together. There's more. I told her about the balcony call. The late-night whispers. The strange tension since surgery discussions started. Ava listened without interrupting. That's something she always did better than me. When I finished, she leaned back slowly. You need legal advice. The words landed heavily. Legal advice sounded dramatic. Marriage ending. Real. I don't even know if anything illegal happened. You also don't know that it didn't. Outside, a garbage truck banged loudly against the curb downstairs. Ava looked toward the sound briefly before lowering her voice. If someone altered insurance documents tied to surgery coverage, this could get ugly. I stared at the moon charm hanging from my silver bracelet. Tiny scratches along the edges from years of wear. Daniel once told me it reminded him of me because I liked small, quiet things. Funny what memories survive. Ava pulled out her phone. I know somebody. That fast. She dated my friend Rachel for like 6 months. Nice guy, lawyer, wears scarves indoors. Despite everything, I laughed. That mattered too. Pain isolates you slowly. Tiny moments of laughter start feeling illegal. The lawyer's name was Michael Levin. His office sat above a bakery downtown. Second floor, smelled faintly like sugar and old paper. I met him 4 days later while Daniel thought I was at physical therapy. I hated lying. But something inside me already knew the truth would not survive in open air yet. Michael looked younger than I expected, mid-30s maybe, loose tie, kind eyes behind tired glasses. He reviewed the documents quietly, while traffic moved outside the windows below. Finally, he leaned back. These signatures are inconsistent. My heartbeat sped up immediately. So I'm not crazy. I didn't say fraud yet, he replied carefully, but I would investigate further. The room suddenly felt smaller. What does further mean? Medical authorization records, policy access history, digital logins. I swallowed hard. Could someone change beneficiary information without me knowing? Yes. The answer came too quickly. That scared me. Michael folded his hands together. Especially spouses or family members with access to personal information. I stared at the rain sliding down the office window. People below hurried under umbrellas, while my entire life quietly shifted shape upstairs. What happens if I report it? That depends what we find. I almost asked another question. Instead, I heard Patricia's voice in my head. You need to think practically now. Suddenly, I understood something ugly. Patricia was not reacting to my illness emotionally. She was reacting financially. The surgery, recovery costs, insurance payouts, possible complications. All of it connected somehow. Michael slid one paper gently toward me. There's one more thing. My stomach tightened instantly. This policy includes a secondary recovery clause tied to long-term disability. I frowned. What does that mean? It means if your condition permanently impacts employment status, additional benefits activate. How much? He named the amount. I actually stopped breathing for a second. $480,000. The office went silent, except for the ticking wall clock. Then Michael added quietly, "And according to this version of the policy, your mother-in-law becomes partial beneficiary under specific circumstances." I felt cold everywhere, even my fingertips. That doesn't make sense. No, he agreed softly, it doesn't. I drove home shaking. Every traffic light felt too long. Every red light gave my mind more time to build terrible possibilities. At home, Daniel sat on the couch watching television with the volume muted. The apartment smelled like tomato soup. Normal. Painfully normal. How was therapy? He asked. I froze briefly, then lied. Fine. He studied my face carefully. You okay? I nodded once. But something had changed now. Before, I thought maybe Daniel was hiding stress. Now I wondered if he was hiding knowledge. That night, he fell asleep early beside me. I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling fan, turning slowly in the dark. The answer had been in that house the entire time. I just did not know where yet. Nothing happened for 2 weeks. Then something did. At 7:06 p.m. on a Tuesday, I opened our shared laptop to print pre-surgery paperwork and found an email Daniel forgot to delete. The sender line read, Patricia Morales. The subject line was only 4 words. Do not let her know. And attached beneath it was a scanned copy of my insurance policy. I read the email 3 times before my brain accepted the words. Do not let her know. The apartment felt too quiet suddenly. The dishwasher hummed softly in the kitchen. A siren cried somewhere far below the building. I stared at the attachment icon while my hands turned numb over the keyboard. Daniel was still at work. At least I thought he was. I clicked the email open carefully. The message itself was short. Daniel, you need to stop panicking and stay focused. If she finds out now, everything becomes harder. We already discussed what matters most. Recovery changes people. You need to think about your future before emotions cloud judgment. Delete this after reading. Mom. My stomach twisted so sharply, I had to press one hand against the desk. There was no direct confession. Nothing obvious. But the tone told me enough. They were discussing me like a problem already in progress. I downloaded the attachment. Insurance records again. Highlighted sections circled in yellow. Recovery payout clauses. Long-term disability percentages. And one handwritten note near the margin in Patricia's sharp, slanted handwriting. Daniel deserves stability. I sat there frozen, while the laptop fan whirred quietly beneath my fingers. Then I heard keys at the front door. I closed everything too fast. Daniel entered carrying takeout containers and rain on his jacket shoulders. Traffic was awful, he muttered. He stopped when he saw me sitting at the table. You okay? There was concern in his voice. Real concern. That made this harder. I looked at him carefully. The man standing in front of me was still the same person who once drove 40 minutes at midnight because I mentioned craving peach ice cream. But now there was something else too. Fear. Yeah, I said softly, just tired. He relaxed immediately. Too immediately. That told me he had been worried about something specific. We ate quietly that night. Rice. Noodles. Neither of us touched much food. Rain tapped against the windows while some game show played softly on television. Daniel kept checking his phone upside down beside his plate. At 8:41 p.m. it buzzed again. Patricia. He declined the call without looking at me. That tiny movement hurt more now because I understood it differently. Not annoyance. Containment. What did your mom want? I asked casually. Nothing important. I nodded slowly. The lie sat between us untouched. After surgery, recovery at home became its own kind of loneliness. People think healing means rest. It doesn't. Healing is boredom mixed with fear. Pill bottles. Half-finished glasses of water. The smell of antiseptic soap. Every movement becoming a negotiation with pain. The first morning home, sunlight cut across our bedroom floor while Daniel helped me sit upright. My incision burned immediately. I bit down hard enough on my lip to taste blood. Easy, he whispered. His hands were gentle. That confused me constantly. Cruel people are easier to survive than conflicted ones. Conflicted people make you question your instincts. Daniel brought me toast I barely ate, helped me walk slowly down the hallway, changed my bandages carefully while avoiding my eyes. The apartment smelled like laundry detergent and pain cream. Outside, life kept moving normally. Inside, everything felt suspended. Patricia arrived at 10:15 a.m. carrying flowers and criticism. She should not be walking this much, she told Daniel immediately. The doctor said movement helps. She looks exhausted. I sat quietly on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, while they argued softly over my body like I was furniture requiring maintenance. Patricia finally turned toward me with a practiced smile. How are we feeling today? We. Always we. Okay. You need protein. You're too pale. Then she noticed my silver bracelet resting beside the couch. The cheap jewelry still survived surgery, I see. Daniel looked up sharply. Mom. Patricia lifted both hands innocently. What? I'm joking. But she was. That was her talent. Every insult arrived wearing polite clothing. 3 days later, another complication appeared. A bill. $8,906. Marked overdue. I stared at it from the kitchen table, while dizziness rolled through me. That can't be right, I whispered. Daniel took the paper immediately. His face changed. Only briefly. But enough. I'll call them. Why is this overdue already? It's probably automatic processing. Daniel. I said I'll handle it. His tone snapped harder than intended. Silence followed immediately afterward. He looked ashamed almost instantly. Sorry, he muttered. The faucet dripped softly behind us. One drop. Then another. I watched him grip the edge of the counter until his knuckles whitened. New pressure entered the apartment after that bill. Thicker. Heavier. Daniel started taking extra shifts at work. Patricia visited more often. Too often. Sometimes I woke from naps and found her standing silently in my kitchen sorting paperwork. One afternoon, I caught her holding my prescription bag. Oh, she said smoothly, I was organizing. Something cold moved through me. Later that evening, I checked my patient portal online. Recent account activity appeared at the bottom. Multiple logins. Not mine. One from Patricia's neighborhood. My hands started shaking so badly, I nearly dropped the phone. I stared at the screen while the bedroom ceiling fan clicked softly overhead. Click. 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 Someone had accessed my medical records 3 times in the past month. I took screenshots immediately, then deleted the notification email from the trash before Daniel could see it. That frightened me too. The speed of my own secrecy. 3 days went by. I replayed those login records every night. On Friday afternoon, Ava came over with soup and clean towels. She stopped mid-sentence the moment she saw my face. What happened? I handed her the phone silently. She read the screen once, then again slower. Oh, hell no. She accessed my records. Without permission. I never gave her permission. Ava paced immediately. Boots thudding across hardwood floors. She's looking for something. What? I don't know. That was the worst part. Nothing connected fully yet. Just fragments. Insurance clauses. Secret emails. Medical access. Pressure. Money. And Daniel floating nervously between all of it. Ava lowered her voice. You need copies of everything. I already sent screenshots to Michael. Good. She crouched beside the couch carefully. Elena. What? You need to prepare for the possibility Daniel knows more than he's saying. The room went completely still. I stared toward the kitchen, where Daniel had once danced terribly while making pancakes on Sunday mornings. My chest hurt suddenly in a place surgery could not explain. I know, I whispered. That night, I almost confronted him. Almost. Daniel came home, exhausted around 11:20 p.m., smelling like rain and printer ink from the office. He sat beside me quietly while I pretended to watch television. Then he reached into his coat pocket. I got you something. A small paper bag. Inside sat a new charm for my silver bracelet. A tiny gold star. Simple. Cheap. Exactly the kind of thing he always bought me before everything became complicated. For one dangerous second, I wanted to believe him completely again. Then his phone buzzed. Patricia. He stared at the screen too long before declining it. And I noticed something small that made my stomach turn cold. His hands were shaking. The next morning, I woke before sunrise because pain burned through my lower abdomen again. The apartment stayed dark except for streetlight glow slipping through the curtains. Daniel slept beside me heavily. I moved carefully toward the bathroom. Halfway down the hallway, I noticed light under the kitchen door. I froze. The kitchen should have been empty. Slowly, I stepped closer. The smell hit me first. Patricia's perfume. White roses. Cold. The kitchen light was on. And lying beside the sink was Patricia's gold bracelet. Except Patricia had not visited in 2 days. I stared at it for several seconds before hearing movement behind me. A floorboard creaked softly near the living room. Someone else was awake. And I suddenly realized I was not alone in the apartment. I turned too fast, and pain tore through my stomach immediately. A sharp burning pull beneath the stitches. I grabbed the hallway wall before collapsing. Jesus, Elena. Daniel's voice. He stepped out of the living room wearing sweatpants and no shirt, eyes wide with panic. What are you doing up? My heartbeat slammed hard against my ribs. I looked past him toward the dark kitchen again. The bracelet still sat beside the sink. Tiny diamonds catching the weak overhead light. Patricia's bracelet. Daniel followed my stare. For 1 second, his entire face changed. Not confusion. Recognition. Then he walked quickly into the kitchen and picked it up. Oh, he said too casually. Mom stopped by yesterday while you were asleep. That's not what you said. He froze. Only briefly. But long enough. You said she hadn't visited in 2 days. Daniel rubbed his forehead immediately. I forgot. Forgot. Another soft lie. The kind that sounds harmless until you collect enough of them. The refrigerator hummed loudly between us. Outside, a truck backed up somewhere below with slow warning beeps. I crossed my arms against the cold, creeping through my body. Why was she here? To drop food off. At midnight. His jaw tightened. It wasn't midnight. What time was it? Daniel looked exhausted suddenly. Why are we doing this right now? There it was again. Deflection wrapped in fatigue. I stared at the bracelet in his hand. Patricia never removed that thing. Not for dishes, not for gardening, not even during family vacations at the lake. Yet somehow she left it behind in our kitchen during a secret visit. Did she access my records? I asked quietly. Daniel looked up sharply. What? My medical portal. No. Too fast. Not even half a second of thought. No. Elena. Then why was her neighborhood attached to login activity? Silence. The hallway light buzzed softly overhead. Daniel opened his mouth. Closed it again. That silence answered more than words could. I felt something inside me crack quietly. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just a small internal sound of trust giving way. I need to go back to bed, I whispered. Elena. I said I'm tired. I walked carefully past him before he could touch me. But halfway to the bedroom, he said something that stopped me cold. She was only trying to help. Only trying to help. I stood there staring into the darkness of our bedroom doorway, while pain pulsed beneath my ribs. Then I asked the question I had been avoiding for weeks. Help who? Daniel did not answer. That was a Saturday. By Wednesday, everything shifted again. Recovery became harder after the confrontation. Not physically. Emotionally. Daniel grew quieter around me, more careful, like every sentence passed through another person first before reaching me. Meanwhile, Patricia became aggressively kind. Soup deliveries. Text messages. Flowers. Every gesture felt rehearsed now. One afternoon, she sat beside my couch folding towels, while daytime television played softly in the background. You know, she said lightly, marriages go through difficult seasons after medical trauma. I kept my eyes on the blanket in my lap. I'm aware. Men don't always handle pressure well. Something in her tone made me finally look up. She smiled softly, almost sympathetically. And suddenly I understood. Patricia believed she was protecting her son from me. Not because she hated me personally, because she saw illness itself as contamination. Weakness. Dependency. A threat to the life she imagined Daniel deserved. That realization made her more human. And somehow much scarier. You think I ruin his future, I said quietly. Patricia paused folding the towel. Then sighed. I think life becomes very long when people spend it rescuing someone. The room went still. A game show audience laughed faintly from the television. I stared at her hands. Perfect nails. Perfect bracelet missing from her wrist. Did you ever love anyone sick? I asked. For the first time, Patricia looked genuinely caught off guard. Her eyes moved briefly toward the window. When she spoke again, her voice sounded older somehow. My father spent 11 years in a wheelchair, she said softly. My mother disappeared inside that house taking care of him. I stayed quiet. Patricia folded the towel once more before continuing. She stopped being a wife, stopped being herself. Her mouth tightened slightly. People romanticize sacrifice until they actually have to live inside it. There it was. The hidden layer beneath all her cruelty. Fear. Not just greed. Fear of watching her son disappear into caretaking the same way her mother had. For one dangerous moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Then she looked directly at my stomach bandages. And children become impossible in situations like this. The sympathy vanished instantly. That night, I cried silently in the shower, while warm water hit the tile around my feet. Not loud crying. The exhausted kind. The kind where your body barely has energy left for grief. Daniel knocked softly on the door. Elena. I wiped my face quickly. Yeah. Can I come in? I almost said no. Instead, I unlocked the door. Steam filled the bathroom mirrors, while Daniel sat carefully on the closed toilet lid beside the shower. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he looked at me with tears already gathering in his eyes. "I'm trying," he whispered. That nearly broke me, because he sounded sincere. And weak. Entrapped. "What are you trying to do?" I asked softly. Daniel looked down immediately. The shower hissed steadily between us. Finally, he said, "Keep everything from falling apart." I wanted to ask which everything. Us. The finances. His mother. Some truth I still could not fully see. But Daniel stood before answering anything else. "I love you," he said quietly. Then he left the bathroom before I could respond. For 1 week, I thought maybe things would calm down after that. Daniel started staying home more. Cooking dinner again. Watching movies beside me on the couch. Once he even laughed for real at some stupid commercial, and the sound startled me because I had missed it so much. False peace can feel almost identical to healing. That's what makes it dangerous. Then the call came. Thursday, 2:16 p.m. I was alone folding laundry slowly because bending still hurt. My phone buzzed against the coffee table. Dr. Keller's office. I answered immediately. "Hello." "Elena," his nurse sounded tense. "The doctor needs to speak with you directly." Cold spread through my chest instantly. A few seconds later, Dr. Keller came on the line. "Mrs. Morales," he said carefully, "I need to ask you something." The washing machine thumped softly in the hallway closet. "What happened?" "We're reviewing your pre-surgery file," he said. "There appear to have been multiple canceled consultations before your operation." I frowned immediately. "What consultations?" "Specialist referrals, pain management reviews, fertility preservation discussions." My heartbeat sped up. I never canceled anything. Silence. Then papers shuffling softly on his end. "Our records show cancellations were confirmed verbally from your household number." I sat down slowly on the couch because suddenly my legs felt weak. "What?" "Several appointments were delayed over a 3-month period." "No," I whispered, "that's impossible." Dr. Keller exhaled carefully. "Elena, if those appointments had happened earlier, your surgery likely would have been scheduled sooner." The room tilted slightly around me. "What does that mean?" Another pause. Then the sentence that changed everything. "It means your condition progressed significantly during those delays." I could barely breathe. Outside, someone laughed near the apartment pool below. Normal life continuing, while mine quietly cracked open again. "Who canceled them?" I whispered. "We're trying to determine that now." I stared at the wall while my pulse roared in my ears. 3 canceled consultations. 3 delays. 3 months. Then suddenly, another memory surfaced. Patricia bringing soup the same week 1 appointment mysteriously disappeared from my calendar. Daniel insisting there must have been scheduling confusion. The late-night balcony call. "Do not let her know." My hands started shaking violently. Dr. Keller's voice softened. "There's one more issue." I pressed my hand against my mouth. "What?" "Someone also requested partial access to your reproductive treatment records before surgery." The laundry machine stopped spinning. Silence filled the apartment. And in that silence, one terrible possibility finally began taking shape. Not just money. Not just control. Something much deeper had been happening around me this entire time. And I still did not know how far it went. I sat on the couch for almost an hour after the call ended. The apartment felt strangely bright. Afternoon sunlight touched the hardwood floors in warm squares, while my entire body went cold. 3 canceled consultations. Someone accessing fertility records. Someone delaying treatment, while my condition worsened inside me. The clock above the television ticked softly. Tick, tick, tick. I kept hearing Patricia's voice from weeks earlier. Children become impossible in situations like this. My stomach tightened hard enough to make me dizzy. At 5:52 p.m., Daniel came home carrying groceries. He stopped immediately when he saw my face. What happened? I looked at him for a long time before answering. The doctor called. His expression changed instantly. Not confusion. Fear. Real fear. He set the grocery bags down too quickly. A carton of eggs rolled halfway across the counter. What did they say? I stood carefully despite the pain, pulling through my abdomen. They said consultations were canceled from our household phone. Daniel went completely still. The silence between us deepened slowly. Did you know about that? I asked. No. Too fast again. But weaker this time. I stared at him. You're lying. Elena. You are lying. My voice stayed calm. That frightened him more than yelling would have. The refrigerator hummed softly behind us. One egg cracked against the counter edge unnoticed. Finally, Daniel sat down heavily at the kitchen table and covered his face with both hands. That was the moment I knew. Not details. Not everything. But enough. How much do you know? I whispered. Daniel stayed silent for several seconds. Then he said something so quietly, I almost missed it. I didn't know it got that bad. The room blurred slightly around me. What does that mean? He lowered his hands slowly. His eyes looked exhausted. Broken. My mom called the clinic a few times. The words landed softly. Too softly for what they meant. I gripped the back of the chair beside me because suddenly standing felt difficult. She canceled my appointments. She thought more opinions would confuse you. I laughed once. A horrible sound. She delayed my surgery. Daniel shook his head immediately. She didn't think it would become serious. She accessed my records. She was worried. About what? He opened his mouth, closed it again, then finally whispered. About me. That hurt worse than everything else. Not because it surprised me, because hearing it aloud made it real. I stared toward the sink, where water dripped slowly from the faucet. One drop, then another. You let this happen. Daniel stood quickly. No, Elena, listen to me. Did you know she changed the insurance policy too? His face lost color immediately. There it was. Confirmation. I felt suddenly calm in a dangerous way. Like my body had finally stopped fighting reality. She told me it was temporary, he whispered. My chest tightened painfully. What? Daniel looked close to vomiting. She said if your recovery became permanent, if you couldn't work, he swallowed hard, the policy would help cover expenses. By nomming your mother beneficiary. She handled all that stuff after my dad died. I trusted her. The mention of his father changed something in his face. A crack opening. I sat down slowly across from him. For the first time since surgery, Daniel looked less like a husband hiding secrets and more like a frightened little boy wearing a grown man's body. My father lost everything before he died, he said quietly. The kitchen smelled faintly like cracked egg and coffee grounds. Hospital debt, mortgage issues. My mom worked 3 jobs after. His voice shook slightly. She kept saying sickness destroys families if you aren't prepared. I stayed silent. Daniel rubbed both hands over his face. When your surgery got bigger, more expensive, she panicked. And you. His eyes filled immediately. I panicked too. There it was. Not evil. Cowardice. Fear wearing practical clothing. You should have told me. I know. You should have protected me. I know. You let her interfere with my medical care. Daniel's shoulders collapsed slightly at that. For several seconds, neither of us moved. Then he whispered the sentence that almost broke me completely. I thought I could manage her without hurting you. The honesty in that sentence hurt because I believed him. And believing him made the betrayal heavier. Outside, rain started softly against the windows again. Daniel stared down at the table. My mom thinks love means preventing disaster before it happens, he said quietly, even if people hate her for it. I thought about Patricia reorganizing my kitchen, monitoring my records, watching my body like a threat approaching her son's future. Then another memory surfaced suddenly. Her father in the wheelchair. Her mother disappearing into caretaking. The hidden vulnerability beneath all her control. Not justification, but explanation. And sometimes explanation hurts more. 3 days went by. I replayed Daniel's confession every night. He became strangely attentive afterward. Too attentive. Cooking meals. Refilling medications. Helping me shower carefully without speaking much. Guilt changes people into servants sometimes. But guilt is not trust. One evening, while folding laundry, Daniel suddenly sat across from me on the couch. I told her to stop. I looked up slowly. What? My mom. His voice sounded tired beyond his age. I told her she can't come over anymore without asking. I studied his face carefully. Did she listen? Daniel gave a short laugh with no humor inside it. No. That answer felt honest at least. He rubbed his wedding ring slowly between 2 fingers. She thinks I'm weak. Are you? He looked at me directly then. For the first time in weeks. Yes. The bluntness surprised me. Daniel leaned back against the couch cushions and stared toward the dark television screen. I spent my whole life trying to keep her calm, he admitted quietly. After my dad died, if she got upset, the whole house changed. I listened carefully. Rain tapped against the balcony railing outside. She checked bank statements every night, controlled groceries, savings, bills. His jaw tightened. If something went wrong financially, she acted like disaster was already at the door. I suddenly understood why Daniel looked terrified every time money entered conversations. This fear had roots older than our marriage. She told me your surgery would change everything forever, he said softly. And you believed her. Yes. The honesty hurt. But it also felt like the first real thing between us in months. Daniel swallowed hard before continuing. When the doctors mentioned possible fertility problems, he looked away briefly. She started saying maybe it was better not to encourage hope. A cold feeling moved through me. She wanted my appointments delayed. She thought more procedures would trap us financially. Us. Daniel closed his eyes. I know how bad that sounds. No. He didn't. Because what crushed me most was not Patricia anymore. It was knowing Daniel had watched all this happen while convincing himself silence counted as protection. That night I could not sleep. By morning, the kitchen smelled like coffee and everything felt worse in daylight. At 8:03 a.m., someone knocked on the apartment door. Daniel froze immediately while pouring coffee. We looked at each other silently. Another knock. Slow. Controlled. Patricia. Daniel opened the door halfway. What are you doing here? She stood perfectly dressed as always. Cream coat, hair pinned neatly, white roses perfume drifting inside the apartment. Then she noticed me standing behind him, and instantly understood something had changed. Her eyes moved from my face to Daniel. What did you tell her? Daniel stepped outside the apartment before answering. But not before I heard Patricia whisper one sentence through clenched teeth. You said you could handle this. The hallway fell silent afterward. I moved closer carefully despite the pain. Their voices stayed low outside the door. Sharp. Urgent. Then suddenly Daniel shouted. Not loudly, but enough. No, Mom. I had never heard him say those words to her before. Not like that. The building hallway went completely quiet. A neighbor's dog barked once somewhere upstairs. Then Patricia spoke again. And her voice sounded different now. Not angry. Scared. If you tell her everything, she whispered, she'll leave you. I stopped breathing for a second. Everything. Not this. Everything. Daniel did not answer immediately. Then I heard something strange. Patricia crying. Soft at first. Then harder. I was trying to save you, she said. For one dangerous moment, the entire situation shifted shape again. Because monsters do not usually cry outside apartment doors, begging their sons not to abandon them. But broken people do. Then Daniel said something I could not fully hear. Patricia suddenly went silent. A few seconds later, the apartment door opened slowly. Daniel stepped back inside alone. His face looked pale. His hands trembled again. What did she mean? I asked quietly. He stared at me for several long seconds. Then he whispered, There's something else you don't know. And before he could continue, his phone started ringing again. This time, it was the hospital. Daniel stared at the hospital number like it might explode in his hand. The ringtone filled the apartment. Sharp. Repetitive. Neither of us moved at first. Then he answered. Hello. I watched his face carefully, while rain slid slowly down the kitchen window behind him. Yes, he said quietly. Okay. A pause. Then. When? His shoulders tightened immediately. Yeah, we'll be there. He ended the call slowly. The apartment became silent, except for the coffee machine clicking as it cooled. What happened? I asked. Daniel rubbed both hands over his face. Dr. Keller wants us both at the hospital tomorrow morning. My stomach dropped. Why? He wouldn't say over the phone. That answer sat badly in my chest. Very badly. Daniel looked toward the hallway where Patricia had stood crying only minutes earlier. Then back at me. There are things in your file they need clarified. Clarified. Such a clean word for something that already felt rotten. I lowered myself carefully into the kitchen chair because dizziness rolled through me again. Daniel moved instantly. You okay? I nodded even though I was. That was becoming automatic now. The next morning smelled like wet pavement and burnt toast. Neither of us slept much. At 7:12 a.m., Daniel drove us downtown in complete silence while windshield wipers dragged across the glass rhythmically. Back. Forth. Back. Forth. The hospital waiting room felt colder than I remembered. Dr. Keller met us personally instead of sending a nurse. That frightened me immediately. Doctors only come themselves when things are serious. Alina, he said gently, Daniel. His office smelled faintly like coffee and disinfectant wipes. Medical charts covered the desk beside him. Daniel sat rigidly beside me. Dr. Keller folded his hands together. We're still reviewing access logs connected to your records. My pulse sped up instantly. But there's another issue involving consent forms submitted before surgery. Daniel shifted beside me sharply. What kind of issue? Dr. Keller opened a folder slowly. These signatures authorizing delayed procedures and declined fertility preservation consultations. He looked directly at me. We need to confirm whether you personally signed them. The room went completely still. I stared at the papers. My name sat at the bottom. Not my handwriting. Not even close now that I looked carefully. No, I whispered. Daniel inhaled sharply beside me. Dr. Keller nodded slowly. We believed there may have been confusion at first, But after recent review, administration escalated the matter. My chest tightened painfully. What happens now? That depends how far this extends. Far? That word echoed strangely in my head. Because suddenly, I realized everyone already suspected this was bigger than one forged signature. Dr. Keller slid another document toward us. Phone records. Dates. Times. Canceled consultations. Every call connected to our home number. Daniel looked physically sick reading them. Then Dr. Keller said something that changed the atmosphere instantly. One call came from inside the hospital. I frowned. What? An in-person cancellation was also made at the front desk 2 months before surgery. Cold spread through me immediately. Someone physically came here. Someone looked hospital staff in the eye and interfered directly. Daniel leaned forward slowly. Who? Dr. Keller hesitated. We're verifying security footage. The office suddenly felt too small to breathe inside. Then someone knocked softly on the door. A nurse stepped in. Sorry, she said quietly. There's someone outside asking for Alina. Daniel turned immediately. Patricia stood in the hallway. Cream coat again. Hands clasped tightly together. For 1 second, nobody spoke. Then Dr. Keller's expression changed subtly. Recognition. You're Mrs. Morales, he asked carefully. Patricia nodded once. And something inside me dropped hard into my stomach. Because now I knew. She had been here before. Patricia stepped inside slowly. I think we should talk together. Daniel stood up immediately. Mom, what are you doing? She ignored him completely. Her eyes stayed on Dr. Keller. I canceled those consultations. Silence. Absolute silence. The air itself seemed to stop moving. Daniel stared at her like he no longer recognized her. You what? Patricia's hands trembled slightly. First real crack I had ever seen in her. She was overwhelmed, Patricia said quietly. The surgery kept expanding. More procedures, more risks, more debt. You forged my name, I whispered. Her eyes moved toward me finally. I thought delaying things would give everyone time to think clearly. Dr. Keller's jaw tightened. You interfered with active medical treatment. Patricia swallowed hard. I never wanted her hurt. But she was hurt, I said. My voice stayed calm. That made the room feel even heavier. Patricia looked suddenly older than before. Tired. I watched my mother disappear caring for my father, she whispered. Every year took another piece of her away. Her eyes filled slowly. I could see it happening again. Daniel stared at her in disbelief. So you sabotaged Alina's treatment? No, Patricia said immediately. I was trying to slow things down. You delayed surgery for months. She still got surgery. The room went silent again after that sentence. Because even Patricia seemed horrified hearing herself say it aloud. I noticed her hands then. No bracelet. The missing gold bracelet suddenly felt symbolic somehow, like even her armor had started falling apart. Dr. Keller spoke carefully. There may be legal consequences for this. Patricia closed her eyes briefly. I know. Daniel looked physically unsteady now. One hand pressed against the desk edge. You lied to me, he whispered. Patricia looked at him with genuine confusion. No, I protected you. That sentence explained everything about her. Protection and control had become the same thing in her mind years ago. And somewhere along the way, Daniel stopped knowing the difference too. 3 days went by. I replayed that meeting every night. Nothing happened for 2 weeks. Then something did. Patricia invited the entire family to dinner. Not asked. Invited. Daniel almost refused immediately. We don't need this. But part of me wanted to go. Not for forgiveness. For clarity. I was tired of conversations happening in corners, hallways, whispered phone calls, half-truths hidden behind concern. So 2 Sundays later, we drove to Patricia's house under a pale gray sky. The neighborhood smelled like cut grass after rain. My incisions still hurt when I sat too long. Daniel noticed every time my face tightened, but stayed mostly quiet. Patricia opened the door before we knocked. For the first time since I met her, she looked uncertain inside her own house. The dining room table was already set perfectly. Candles, folded napkins, crystal glasses, control in physical form. Daniel's cousin Marissa arrived first with her husband and 2 loud children who immediately changed the atmosphere by existing normally. That helped for a while. People talked about work, school, traffic, anything except the obvious things sitting underneath dinner like a bomb. Patricia barely ate. She kept twisting a cloth napkin slowly in her lap. At one point, I excused myself to the bathroom because sitting upright too long still burned through my abdomen. The upstairs hallway smelled like lavender cleaner. As I passed Patricia's office, I heard voices inside. Daniel. Patricia. Low. Urgent. I stopped before thinking. You can still fix this, Patricia whispered. It's already destroyed. No, it is. You forged medical documents. I was trying to save your marriage. A sharp silence followed. Then Daniel said something so quietly, I almost missed it. You never cared whether Alina stayed healthy. Patricia answered immediately. That's not true. But she sounded uncertain for the first time. I should have walked away then. Instead, I noticed something small through the half-open office door. A folder sitting on Patricia's desk. My name written across the tab. Cold moved through my body instantly. I pushed the door open fully before either of them noticed. Patricia stood immediately. Elena. I ignored her. The folder contained copies of my insurance documents, medical schedules, printed emails, notes in Patricia's handwriting, and one page that made my entire body go numb. A fertility clinic intake form. Cancelled. Signed with my forged signature. Date stamped 3 months earlier. My hands started shaking violently. You canceled this too. Daniel looked horrified. Patricia stepped forward carefully. Elena, listen to me. No. My voice cracked slightly for the first time all night. You decided I shouldn't even have the chance. Patricia's eyes filled immediately. The surgery risks were increasing, pregnancy complications. You made that choice for me. Silence swallowed the room. Downstairs, someone laughed faintly at dinner. Life continuing 1 floor below, while mine shattered quietly upstairs. Daniel looked at the papers again, then at his mother, and finally asked the question neither of us had fully understood yet. How many things did you change without telling us? Patricia opened her mouth. Stopped. Her face lost color slowly. And in that moment, I realized there was still one truth nobody had uncovered yet. One final thing she had done. Something even Daniel did not know. After that dinner, nobody touched dessert. Marissa gathered her children quietly while pretending not to notice the tension upstairs. Plates remained half full around the table. Candle wax melted slowly beside untouched wine glasses. Patricia stayed in her office. Daniel stood near the front door, staring at nothing. And I sat in the passenger seat during the drive home, feeling like my entire marriage had been rewritten by other people's decisions. Streetlights blurred across the windshield. Orange. Gold. Orange again. What else is there? I finally asked. Daniel gripped the steering wheel tighter. I don't know. But he sounded afraid that he did. The apartment felt different after the dinner. Not angry. Hollow. Like all the pretending had finally drained out of the walls. Daniel slept on the couch that night without us discussing it. Around 3:00 a.m., I woke to the sound of him quietly crying in the living room. I stayed in bed staring at the ceiling fan, turning slowly overhead. Part of me wanted to comfort him. Another part stayed perfectly still. Because grief does not erase damage. The next morning, Ava arrived carrying coffee and enough anger for all three of us. She canceled fertility appointments, she repeated. Daniel sat at the kitchen table looking wrecked. She thought. I don't care what she thought. Ava rarely interrupted people. That's how I knew she was truly furious. She interfered with medical care, repeatedly. Daniel nodded weakly. I know. No, Ava snapped. You're only starting to know. The kitchen smelled like burnt toast because Daniel forgot bread in the toaster earlier and never removed it. Small details kept exposing how badly everything was unraveling. I sat quietly holding my heating pad against my stomach while Ava paced near the sink. Then Daniel suddenly spoke. There's something else. The room went still immediately. He looked at me directly. I remembered something after dinner. My pulse sped up. Daniel swallowed hard. About 6 weeks before surgery, Mom asked me for copies of your hormone testing results. Why? She said she wanted a second opinion from a specialist friend. Ava laughed once in disbelief. There was no specialist friend. Daniel rubbed both hands together nervously. I know that now. I stared at him carefully. What did she do with the results? I don't know. That answer felt dangerous. Very dangerous. At 11:34 a.m., Daniel's phone rang. Dr. Keller's office again. Daniel answered immediately, while Ava and I watched his face change color in real time. We'll come now, he said. No one spoke during the drive. Rain clouds gathered low over the city. Traffic crawled slowly through wet intersections, while my incision pulsed painfully with every bump in the road. I kept replaying Patricia's office folder in my mind. Canceled consultations. Forged signatures. Printed records. How long had she been building that file? Weeks. Months. The hospital smelled exactly the same as before. Bleach. Coffee. Warm recycled air. Dr. Keller met us in a private consultation room this time. Not his office. That mattered immediately. Private rooms are for difficult conversations. He looked exhausted when he walked in carrying another folder. Elena, he said softly, there's been an update from administration. Daniel sat beside me rigidly. Ava crossed her arms tightly against her chest. Dr. Keller placed several printed pages on the table. Hospital security recovered footage from the fertility department. Cold spread through my body instantly. Okay, I whispered. He slid one photograph toward me. Patricia. Standing at the clinic reception desk. Date stamp visible in the corner. 3 months before surgery. I stared at the image while something sharp twisted through my chest. She told staff she was family support handling paperwork on your behalf, Dr. Keller explained quietly. Daniel covered his mouth with one hand. She signed cancellation confirmations herself. The room became silent, except for the soft buzz of fluorescent lights overhead. Then Dr. Keller took a breath before continuing. There's another issue involving your lab work. Every nerve in my body tightened. What kind of issue? Dr. Keller looked uncomfortable now. Your hormone panel results were altered before final consultation review. Ava leaned forward sharply. What? We believe pages were removed from your printed file after pickup. I stared at him blankly. I don't understand. Dr. Keller folded his hands together slowly. Elena, your original test results showed viable fertility markers before surgery. The air left my lungs. What? Daniel looked at me immediately. Dr. Keller continued carefully. Had you received timely consultation and preservation referrals, there were likely options available before disease progression increased surgical risk. Nobody moved. Nobody even breathed normally. Because suddenly, the full shape of the damage appeared. Not just delayed treatment. Lost choices. Lost time. Patricia had not only interfered with surgery scheduling. She interfered with whether I even knew I still had a chance. My vision blurred slightly. She knew, I whispered. Dr. Keller hesitated. We can't confirm intent beyond documented interference. But intent no longer mattered to me. Not fully. Because consequences already existed. I looked down at my own hands, shaking in my lap. Then another realization struck me hard. She wanted me to believe it was already hopeless. Daniel's face crumpled immediately. Oh my God. Ava stood abruptly and walked toward the window because rage practically vibrated off her body. Dr. Keller lowered his voice. There's one more thing you should know. My stomach dropped again. What happened next is not what I expected, and it is not what they expected either. Dr. Keller slid one final document across the table. A formal internal complaint. Filed 2 weeks earlier. Submitted anonymously. I frowned. What is this? Daniel stared at the page first, then went completely pale. Because the signature at the bottom belonged to him. I looked at him slowly. You reported her. Daniel nodded once. Tears already gathering in his eyes. The night you found the insurance papers, he whispered, I started realizing something was wrong. I stared at him in disbelief. You filed this before surgery. Yes. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was scared. The honesty landed heavily between us. Daniel wiped both hands over his face shakily. I kept thinking I could stop her quietly before things got worse. His voice cracked. Then everything kept getting worse anyway. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then someone knocked gently at the consultation room door. A nurse stepped inside. There's a woman asking to see the family. Patricia. Of course. Daniel stood immediately. No. But before anyone could stop it, Patricia appeared behind the nurse, already walking into the room. She looked smaller somehow. No makeup. No perfect coat. No bracelet. Just a tired woman carrying too much control for too many years. Then she saw the security photograph sitting on the table and understood instantly. Her face collapsed. Not dramatically. Quietly. Like a building finally giving up holding itself upright. Elena, she whispered. I looked directly at her. For the first time, I noticed how tired her eyes really were. How old fear had made her. But understanding pain does not erase what pain creates. You took away my choices, I said softly. Patricia started crying immediately. I thought I was protecting Daniel. You were protecting your fear. The room went silent. Patricia pressed trembling fingers against her mouth. Then Daniel spoke. And his voice sounded steadier than I had heard in months. You don't get to decide people's lives because you're afraid. Patricia looked at him like she had been struck. For 1 second, I saw the exact moment she realized her son no longer belonged inside her control. That realization broke something inside her. I never wanted this, she whispered. But the truth was sitting on the table in photographs, forms, signatures, and missing medical time. Wanting no longer mattered either. Then Patricia said one final thing before leaving the room. Something so quiet only the three of us heard it clearly. I thought if she couldn't have children, she whispered, you would leave before you lost yourself. Daniel closed his eyes. Not from anger. From grief. Because that sentence finally revealed the full tragedy underneath everything. Patricia had spent so many years terrified of watching another woman disappear into sacrifice that she became the very thing that destroyed people instead. She walked out of the consultation room slowly after that. No one stopped her. The door clicked shut softly behind her. And for the first time in months, the silence that followed felt honest. 3 months after the hospital meeting, I could finally walk around the block without stopping to rest. Not quickly, not gracefully, but fully upright. The October air smelled like rain and cold leaves. Somewhere nearby, someone burned wood in a fireplace even though winter had not arrived yet. Recovery stopped feeling dramatic by then. Healing became small instead. Laundry folded without pain. Standing long enough to cook eggs. Sleeping through the night without waking from cramps sharp enough to steal breath. Tiny victories. The kind nobody claps for. Daniel and I still live together. That surprises people sometimes. But real endings rarely happen all at once. Especially when love and damage grow in the same place. After the hospital investigation started, Patricia stopped calling for a while. Lawyers became involved quietly. Hospital administration handled the forged paperwork internally before law enforcement ever entered the conversation. In the end, Patricia avoided criminal charges because the hospital chose settlement agreements over public litigation. I had mixed feelings about that. Some nights I wanted consequences. Other nights I remembered her crying outside our apartment door, sounding less like a villain and more like a terrified child trapped inside an aging woman's body. Both things were true. Daniel started therapy 2 weeks after the hospital meeting. At first he hated it. I could tell. Every Thursday evening, he came home emotionally wrung out and strangely quiet. Once I found him sitting on the kitchen floor, staring at a cabinet for almost 10 minutes. "What happened?" I asked gently. He laughed weakly without looking up. My therapist asked what I wanted without worrying about my mom first. The kitchen smelled like dish soap and onions from dinner prep. And Daniel looked embarrassed. I didn't know how to answer. That broke my heart in a different way than betrayal had. Not softer, just sadder. Ava remained furious for months. Honestly, someone needed to be. The first time Daniel tried apologizing directly to her, she stared at him across my hospital follow-up waiting room and said, "You kept confusing silence with kindness." He cried in the parking garage afterward. Not loudly, just quietly behind the steering wheel, while rain tapped against the windshield. I sat beside him without speaking. Because some grief deserves witnesses more than solutions. 2 weeks later, Dr. Keller referred me to a fertility specialist for updated evaluations. I almost canceled the appointment twice. Fear changes your relationship with hope. Hope starts feeling dangerous after people weaponize it around you. The clinic waiting rooms smelled like vanilla coffee creamer and printer paper. Women flipped through magazines quietly while soft piano music played overhead. Daniel sat beside me holding 2 paper cups. His hands still shook when nervous. Some habits survive everything. "You don't have to come in if you don't want to," I told him softly. He looked at me immediately. "I want to." And for once, I believed him without needing proof. The appointment itself lasted an hour. More scans. More discussions. More possibilities than certainty. That part mattered too. People expect endings to arrive cleanly wrapped in answers. Real life rarely does that. The specialist explained that future pregnancy might still be difficult, maybe impossible naturally, maybe not. There were options, treatments, time limits, unknowns. But this time, the information belonged to me. Not filtered. Not hidden. Mine. When we left the clinic, sunlight hit the parking lot so brightly I had to squint. Daniel opened the passenger door carefully for me like he used to years earlier. Then he said something unexpected. If you decide you never want kids after all this, he swallowed hard, I still choose you. I stared at him quietly. The breeze moved fallen leaves across the pavement between us. A year earlier, that sentence would have sounded romantic. Now it sounded earned. There's a difference. Nothing happened for 2 weeks. Then something did. Patricia called me directly for the first time since the hospital confrontation. I almost ignored it. Almost. But curiosity won. Hello. Silence at first. Then, I found something that belongs to you. Her voice sounded smaller now. Less polished. I closed my eyes briefly. What is it? That bracelet charm Daniel bought after your surgery. The tiny gold star. I had lost it weeks earlier. How did you get it? Another silence. Then Patricia answered honestly. It got caught in my coat the night I came to your apartment. I stared out the kitchen window while evening light faded slowly outside. The faucet dripped softly behind me. One drop. Then another. Why are you calling? I asked quietly. Patricia exhaled shakily. Because I'm trying to learn how to return things instead of controlling them. The honesty startled me. Not because it fixed anything. Because it sounded painfully sincere. We met 3 days later at a small cafe near the river. Neutral ground. The place smelled like cinnamon pastries and espresso beans. Rain tapped gently against the windows while quiet jazz played overhead. Patricia looked older than I remembered. Not physically. Emotionally. Control had drained out of her posture somehow. She slid the tiny gold star charm across the table toward me. Neither of us touched it immediately. Then Patricia opened her purse slowly and removed the gold bracelet. The one she wore every day for as long as I had known her. The one that tapped against my hospital bed rail while she whispered about my future like I was already disappearing. Without speaking, she placed it beside the charm. I looked at her in confusion. My father gave this to my mother before he got sick, Patricia said softly. After he became disabled, she stopped wearing it because she said jewelry felt pointless when life turns into survival. Rain streaked softly down the cafe windows. Patricia stared at the bracelet instead of me. When she died, I promised myself I would never let fear destroy another family like that again. Her mouth tightened slightly, and somehow fear became the only thing guiding me. I stayed quiet. Because some confessions need space more than responses. Patricia finally looked up. I can't ask forgiveness from you, she whispered. I don't think I deserve it. The cafe espresso machine hissed loudly behind us. People talked softly at nearby tables, completely unaware that decades of damage sat between 2 women beside the window. Then Patricia did something I never expected. She pushed the bracelet toward me. You keep it. I frowned immediately. No. Yes. That bracelet means too much to you. Patricia smiled sadly. That's exactly why I shouldn't wear it anymore. For a second, neither of us moved. Then I picked up the bracelet carefully. The gold felt unexpectedly warm from her skin. Not evil. Not cursed. Just human. Complicated. Heavy. When I left the cafe, rain had stopped. The air smelled clean and cold. Cars moved slowly along the river while evening lights reflected across wet sidewalks. Daniel waited near the curb, leaning against the car. He looked nervous seeing my face. How did it go? I held up the bracelet slightly. His eyes widened immediately. She gave you that? I nodded once. Daniel looked down quietly for a second, then asked the question carefully. Do you think you can ever forgive her? I thought about the hospital room, the canceled appointments, the forged signatures, the woman crying outside our apartment door terrified of losing her son the same way her mother lost herself. Then I thought about something else too. How fear spreads quietly through families until somebody finally refuses to carry it forward. I think forgiveness is smaller than people imagine, I said softly. Sometimes it's just deciding not to become the same kind of hurt. Daniel stared at me for several seconds, then slowly reached for my hand. This time, I let him hold it. Not because everything was repaired, not because trust magically returned, but because healing had finally started belonging to me instead of everyone else. As we drove home, city lights blurred softly across the windows. Daniel kept one hand on the steering wheel and the other around mine. And for the first time in a very long while, the future no longer felt like something happening to me. It felt like something I might actually get to choose for myself.